Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night chat about the news and everything going on in the world and some other things I want to talk about. So let's just do it. Let's jump right into it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. A lot is happening, and we are trying to keep up with it. I've got a lot to say about all the developments that just went down today, as I'm sure you're aware. But yeah, let's talk about it. We're going to be following our usual format, which is first I'll give my opening remarks. Then from there, we'll do a roll call. And then after that, I will answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about on the second half of our show, the best way to communicate it, to get me answering questions, is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That's the best way to send your questions. You can also do super chats. That's also really awesome. Super chats are great. You can do Rumble rants, other things, but the best way is buy me a coffee. We're monetized. You can do super chats. All right. Now, in terms of announcements, our national 7-day training program for the Center for Political Innovation is coming up in August. So go ahead and register if you would like to attend. We got a good crew of people that are coming already. We're trying to figure out everything, and we'll have more about that later tonight. We'll be talking more about that, later tonight, but we got to talk about the news first and some other things first. But we got a lot of interesting developments. So that's coming up. Also, we are having our France Out of Africa demonstration during the National 7-Day program in Chicago on August 14th at 5 p.m. And that'll be outside the French consulate in Chicago. That is going to be really, really great. So that's going to be important. So I hope that you will join us in Chicago for our national event. We are the Center for Political Innovation, and we are a great group of anti-imperialist organizers, always doing great stuff. This is CPI. Check us out. Yep, that's us. We're the Center for Political Innovation. And if you want to get involved in anti-imperialism and building a movement in this country with other people that are committed to it, you want to experience the comradeship and the joy of being part of a community dedicated to building a new America beyond imperialism, you should join the Center for Political Innovation, because we are doing it like nobody else. We are organizing and building like nobody else. We are the Center for Political Innovation, and we have so many great plans. So you should get involved, because we are where it's at. CPI all the way. Now, just another reminder that if you've got anything you'd like me to talk about in the second half of our program tonight, I will answer people's questions. The best way to send questions, the absolute best way, the best way to send your questions is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. And you can drop your questions there. You can be anonymous. You can ask a long time. You can ask if you're watching this later. It doesn't have to be while I'm live. We also take super chats. Super chats are appreciated on YouTube now that we are monetized once again. You can also do Rumble rants, etc. So, yeah, that's what we got. So send some questions for the second half of the show. After I finish my opening remarks, we'll do a roll call, find out who's watching, then we'll do that. All right, jumping into the news. So if you haven't heard, there is a deal that has been reached between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it appears that this 4-month war has reached its conclusion. A memorandum of understanding has already been signed, and the formal signing of the U.S. and Iran agreement will be taking place on Friday. Now, that is the news, and I did my job as an RT reporter. As soon as this news broke, I reported it on the airwaves. This was me on the air reporting it.
They're doing a little hunting for a couple of mines that they've already found, but it's essentially ships are starting to go out now. On Friday, it'll be completely open.
Well, the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran have signed a Memorandum of Understanding. And this has the whole world asking, is this indeed the end of this 4-month war between the United States and Iran? That remains in question, but a formal signing ceremony is set to take place on Friday. As of now, we understand this Memorandum of Understanding has been signed on by U.S. President Trump, JD Vance, the U.S. Vice President, as well as the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. And the peace deal essentially hinges on the issue of an end to hostilities in Lebanon, and then a second phase of the agreement that involves 60 days of discussion between the United States and Iran regarding Iran's peaceful nuclear energy program, whether or not Iran has the right to practice peaceful nuclear power under the JCPOA and under the International Atomic Energy Agency's observation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. All of this is very, very big. Now, there are reports about what this deal entails, but U.S. President Donald Trump says that lifting sanctions on Iran is not part of the agreement.
Mr. President, does the deal involve any sanctions relief for Iran? When would that go into effect?
No, it doesn't. Well, they have to. It's really a behavioral thing. If they do what they're supposed to do, that starts taking effect.
Now, according to the Iranian Foreign Ministry, one big part of the deal is that U.S. government frozen funds, assets of Iran, bank accounts with money belonging to Iran or allegedly belonging to Iran or belonging to Iranian individuals that have been frozen around the world by the U.S. government. These Iranian assets that have been seized all across the planet will be unfrozen, and Iran will get its own funds back. That it looks like the United States has agreed to that. And a big point of the agreement is that hostilities in Lebanon will come to an end. That is the understanding, according to the spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry.
Lebanon and the end of the war in Lebanon are an inseparable part of the broader agreement to end the conflict. We've demonstrated in the past that we are determined in this regard. The cessation of hostilities and a ceasefire in Lebanon was part of the agreement dated April the 8th, and in practice we've proven that we are serious about this matter. Therefore, in the future as well, we will closely monitor developments, and wherever necessary, we will use all available tools to ensure that the other parties fulfill their commitments.
Now, voices in Tehran are saying the real test of the agreement isn't what's in writing, but rather what comes out in the implementation. And at this point, it remains to be seen whether Israel will indeed cease hostilities in Lebanon, as this agreement hinges on that, as well as the second phase of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran. Now, Iranian officials are making clear they are proceeding with caution. This is what the deputy foreign minister of Iran had to say.
The Memorandum of Understanding was concluded despite our complete distrust in our enemies. We have no trust in the enemy. Our trust is, in fact, in our own military power, our diplomatic power, and the support and cohesion of our people. For this reason, the implementation of this Memorandum of Understanding is a very important matter, and we have, in fact, specific plans to monitor the fulfillment of America's commitments under this memorandum.
Trump says this is a way better deal. He's saying that he won the war against Iran. However, Iran is saying that it is victorious and that they have withstood an all-out onslaught from the United States. They have maintained their regional allies. They have retaliated effectively against U.S. bases and U.S. infrastructure in the region and effectively defended their country in the face of an attack by the United States. So Iran is viewing this as a victory for itself. So what is actually the case, and will this actually be the end of the conflict? A lot hinges on what happens in the next 60 days. We're looking forward to that signing agreement taking place on Friday. A lot is still up in the air. Both sides are calling it a victory. A memorandum has been signed, and there's lots and lots of questions as we see a slight uptick in the global markets with talk of the Strait of Hormuz gradually being reopened.
Yeah. So that's where it's at. Now, a very, very interesting aspect of this deal is being clarified. Iran said that they demanded that they be paid $300 billion in reparations for what was done to their country. And Iran said they're getting $300 billion. And immediately, people were saying, what? America's going to give Iran $300 billion? I mean, it's already understood that Iran is going to get all of the money that the U.S. government has frozen that belongs to them around the world. But where in the world is the United States going to get $300 billion? So JD Vance is now explaining where this $300 billion is coming from. And JD Vance went on television this morning and he clarified, and he, I guess in his version of events, Iran doesn't get all that money at once, and it doesn't come from America. It comes from the Gulf states. This is JD Vance explaining the $300 billion that will go to Iran.
The Iranians are saying that they're going to have access to a $300 billion reconstruction fund. True or false?
Well, Ed, that's the sort of thing they could have access to, funded by the Gulf Coast Coalition, so long as they honor their end of the obligation. I think that one of the things you're going to see, Ed, and people have to be skeptical of this, is that the hardliners in the Iranian system will overemphasize the benefits that Iran gets while underemphasizing all the things that they have to concede and all the things they have to provide in order to get these benefits. So we absolutely are open to the Gulf Coast countries investing in the reconstruction of Iran, but only if Iran ends their nuclear program, ends their enriched stockpile of material, and is really open to an inspections and enforcement regime that gives the American people confidence they're never going to have a nuclear weapon. So I think the dance you're going to see, Ed, which is going to be interesting, is the Iranian media, especially the hardline media, they're going to talk a lot about what they get without talking about what they give. It's important for all of us to correct that record.
Okay. So it's not America that will give them the $300 billion. It's the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all of these countries are going to pay for it. And it's only if they comply. And it's gradually if they comply with the deal. Now, there was just a lot of uproar in response to this announcement. I mean, something just seems off about the whole thing. One thing about the announcement is that Israel has to stop attacking Lebanon. And Israel has given absolutely no indication that they will do that. And then 60 days from now, the second phase of the agreement is within the next 60 days, they're supposed to reach an agreement regarding Iran's peaceful nuclear energy program. And, you know, if those talks don't go well, we're back to square one. There's a lot here that doesn't make sense. And we got JD Vance now made a special video message that he put on the internet tonight to defend the deal.
Vance here to talk a little bit about what is in the Iran deal, the great peace deal that the President of the United States made last night. Number one, what this deal means is that the Straits of Hormuz are open immediately. You're already seeing oil and gas prices come down just over the past 24 hours. Number two, it ensures that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. And we have to back up for a second and appreciate that what the president has done is completely decimated Iran's nuclear program. Now, this deal really has two pathways. On the one hand, if the Iranians make the long-term commitments never to rebuild, then they're going to be welcomed into the world economy. If, on the other hand, they try to rebuild that nuclear program, they're never going to have the resources in order to do so. So it's a win-win for the American people. We ensure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon either way. And now it's really up to the Iranians. Over the next few months, we're going to see if they're serious about dismantling that program for the long term. If they do, the president has said, we want their country to be successful. But what we know is that our country is successful thanks to great presidential leadership and a lot of good decisions. Thank you, guys.
All right. So let's just go over the facts. Iran has never had a nuclear weapons program, ever. At no point. Their position since 1979, when they had their revolution, is we do not want nuclear weapons. Now, in light of recent events, it's possible that could change. But as of now, the Iranian government position from the time that the Islamic Republic was created in 1979 all the way up to today, their position is we will not get a nuclear weapon. Pretty simple. Now, they have had a peaceful nuclear energy program. And in 2015, they got rid of almost all of it. Pretty much the entire peaceful nuclear energy program, except for like one or two sites, was dismantled in 2015 as part of the Iran nuclear deal. And in response to that, the United States bombed Iran, murdered Qasem Soleimani, imposed more sanctions on Iran, and now we have the latest situation, the murder of the supreme leader. Last year, the only remaining nuclear sites that Iran has were attacked by the United States. And the United States attacked those sites. And at that point, Donald Trump said we have completely destroyed Iran's nuclear program. Their nuclear energy program is completely gone. So now we're told that this war decimated Iran's nuclear program, but there was no nuclear program. They said they did that last year, and Iran gave up almost all of its peaceful nuclear energy. What is going on? All right, this is complete. This is all complete bullshit. All right, there's many layers of complete bullshit. Iran has never had a nuclear weapons program. They have had peaceful nuclear energy. They got rid of almost all of it, and then the USA blew it up, and there is absolutely no justification for this war. There was no activity by Iran that in any way made this recent military action necessary. On top of that, if you then throw into the hopper that, the USA murdered Iran's supreme leader, the USA blew up an elementary school and killed a whole bunch of young girls. I mean, the USA has destroyed all kinds of infrastructure in Iran. I mean, it's just a vicious criminal attack on Iran that was not justified in any way. The whole world, including countries that are generally part of imperialism, like France and Germany and Britain and others, they were fully on the side of the United States, or fully on the side of Iran, and saying that this shouldn't be happening. Maybe they don't agree with Iran on this or that. And so now we're in a situation where the USA is declaring victory because a peaceful nuclear energy program that was pretty much gone already is, I guess, in theory, still gone. Like the whole thing there, this is totally absurd. On top of that, the Strait of Hormuz has been closed by Iran. That was their response, was to make the global economy screen by closing the Strait of Hormuz. So then the response of Trump was to blockade the blockade, which made no sense. So, like Iran blockaded the strait and then they blockaded their blockade, which is like now the blockade is double blockaded. I mean, it's, the USA didn't apparently have the military capability to go send forces in and forcibly reopen the Strait of Hormuz, right? Because that would have just come at too much of a human cost, right? There would have been too many U.S. soldiers killed and U.S. servicemen killed in the process. So now we have a situation where Iran is voluntarily opening up the strait. in exchange for their money going back to them, all the money that the USA has stolen from them around the world being unfrozen. And there's talk of $300 billion being invested into Iran. And in 30 days, over the next, 60 days, there's going to be negotiations between the United States and Iran about how much their peaceful nuclear energy program will continue. And this is all very, very, very strange. And I honestly don't know what to believe. It is clear one of the points that was agreed on is that Israel will stop attacking Lebanon. Israel has no intention of stopping its attacking on Lebanon. So I don't know how this deal can continue. I don't even know what to make of this. But the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament and JD Vance and Donald Trump, all three of them signed a memorandum of understanding. And on Friday, they're going to get together in person and sign some kind of agreement. This doesn't really make sense. But the idea that the Strait of Hormuz would be opening, right, and it's gradually opening because you can't, there's mines that, you gotta, you can't just open it. So the Strait of Hormuz is opening, and the global markets are, celebrating that, and we'll see what happens. This is very, very strange, and it appears Donald Trump is having to deal with the fact that he wrecked the world economy. And, amid that, he just threw a big birthday party for himself on the White House lawn. And people are not thrilled. And so, in light of that, Donald Trump is trying to fix this. Iran is patting itself on the back right now because they said, look, we got viciously attacked by the largest military in the world. Not only did our government not fall, but we repelled the attack. We retaliated very effectively against all the major U.S. military bases in the region. We hit Israel a few times. We repelled the attack, and now the aggressor has signed an agreement with us, and they're telling us we might get $300 billion. And yeah, it looks like Iran is coming out of this feeling very strong, that they kind of brought the United States to its knees by closing the Strait of Hormuz. And the United States didn't feel confident enough to just go in and forcibly open it. And the USA didn't invade Iran. There was not a ground invasion of Iran. There was instead, the United States seems to, this, if anything, speaks to the strength of Iran and the Houthis too. I really do maintain that the Houthis, Ansar Allah, who, we as CPI, we have published this book about, right? We are very, very interested in Yemen and CPI, and we published this book to educate the American people about who the Houthis are and what they're all about. And we've done a lot around that. The Houthis, Ansar Allah, they were threatening to close the Strait of Bab el-Mandab. And in response to that, the United States said, rather than take the huge risk of having a high body count of American servicemen killed, what we're going to do is we'll reach some kind of agreement with Iran. Now, I am having a hard time believing that this deal can hold. It just doesn't seem like, if Israel is not going to stop attacking Lebanon, if we still have 60 days where they're going to discuss the Iran nuclear energy program, if Iran was promised $300 billion and now America says, well, that money is going to come from the Gulf countries, and the Gulf countries are saying, no, it's not. I don't know how this deal holds. I just don't. I would like a deal like this to be in place, and I would like to see the USA and Iran not be fighting with each other. I'd like to see the Strait of Hormuz opened. I'd like to see Iran get its money back and sanctions lifted. But I don't know, folks. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And so we're just going to have to watch. Now, one thing that wasn't in the deal, and this is what I said, I warned you all about this, and I said, there's no way Iran will ever agree to stop supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, Ansar Allah in Yemen, the Palestinian resistance. They're just not going to do that. And they didn't. That's not in the agreement. And Iran made clear, our regional allies and our support for them is not part of this deal. And Trump made that clear too. So at least there's nothing completely unrealistic, but I have no idea. I have no idea what is going to happen. This is very, very bizarre. We'll see what happens on Friday if this so-called signing agreement still happens. We'll see how things go from there. We'll see. We shall see. This is all a very, 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 very bizarre situation. Now, in the immediate aftermath, before I even went on RT, I went on WBAI radio. I was scheduled to go on WBAI radio anyway, and they talked with me on WBAI radio about the Iran nuclear agreement, as well as the Russia-Ukraine conflict and some other issues. So this is my interview I did today on WBAI New York City radio. And I'm going to put this on, but before I do, I would just want to mention these interviews I do on WBAI are a very big deal. New York City is a very densely populated place, probably one of the most densely populated parts of the country. Every time I get on WBAI, tens of thousands of people are listening to me. Because of the concentration of the population, especially older folks in New York City tend to get their news from the radio. And WBAI has a very big audience, in Harlem in particular, because it has Black nationalist radio programming. People like Nellie Bailey have shows on WBAI. Lisa Davis has had shows on WBAI before. She's a friend of CPI, a friend of the Uhuru movement. And because there's a lot of Black nationalist programming, it tends to get a lot of listeners in Harlem. WBAI also, historically, not as much anymore, but it used to very much have a relationship with a guy named Gary Null, who's the owner of a chain of health food stores. And he had a lot of influence at WBAI. And so there's a lot of like natural health kind of people who listen to WBAI. So when I go on WBAI, keep in mind that tens of thousands of people are listening. I actually did a research, and there's not recent data, but the last time they did data about how many people are listening to WBAI every day, they ranked it at about 20,000 people. So I'm, these radio interviews I do on WBAI multiple times a week, usually at least once a week, sometimes twice a week during the noon hour on their show, Frontline Voices. They're a big deal. And, they may not, get a whole bunch of likes and shares on social media, but they're a really, really big deal. So I'm just going to put on my WBAI interview from today. It did get interrupted at one point due to technical difficulties or whatever, but that happens in live radio. But yeah, this is my WBAI interview I gave on this topic.
Joining me now is Qalibaf, Maupin, journalist, author, and founder of the Center for Political Innovation. On a quick recap of President Donald Trump's birthday bash, the Iran Memorandum of Understanding, the upcoming G7 in Europe, with a focus on Ukraine and Russia, and if we have time, Palestine action. Welcome to the show, Caleb.
Sure, glad to be here as always.
So I wondered if I could just get your take on two things that happened yesterday. This announcement that there is some sort of memorandum of understanding, although the details haven't been released yet, between Iran and the U.S., although Iran says it's provisional on, of course, Israel's ceasing hostilities in Lebanon. And President Donald Trump's birthday bash on the lawn of the White House. I wondered if I could get your take quickly on those two items.
Yeah, well, I was comparing that to an agreement that was made with North Korea. In 1994, Madeleine Albright visited North Korea. North Korea was looking like they were going to develop a nuclear weapon, and the Clinton administration made a deal with North Korea that in exchange for them staying in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and not developing nuclear weapons, the USA would give them lots of aid in terms of food, lots of aid in terms of heating gas, and also would help them develop peaceful nuclear energy. And Congress then cut off the payments. And I feel like this $300 billion, this is something that Congress could also cut off. And Israel has a super-duper majority in terms of support in the Congress. So Iran may be promised $300 billion for reconstruction, but I doubt they'll get it. I think it is likely that they will get some sanctions relief in the short term. And I think it's likely that they will get, the funds unfrozen that the USA has agreed to unfreeze around the world. But I have a hard time believing they'll get that $300 billion. I feel like that will be cut off. by the Congress, and we may be back where we started. And that's what you have to look at about this whole thing. So it sounds good. It sounds like hostilities between the USA and Iran have concluded. It appears, or at least, you know, we have a 2-month pause, at least a 2-month agreement that Iran has signed. But where are we? We're right back where we started. There was absolutely no provocation to cause this conflict, none. Out of the blue, the USA murdered Iran's supreme leader, destroyed a girls' elementary school, bombed and killed all kinds of Iranian civilians and all kinds of infrastructure. And as a result, we're back where we started, and we have to, in theory, pay $300 billion to clean it up. Now, Trump is saying that this is a better deal than the Obama administration's deal. Now, you have to remember, Obama's Iran nuclear deal, Iran had a huge peaceful nuclear energy program at the time, and Obama got them to completely give it up and shut down almost all their power plants and all their nuclear power plants. What has Trump gotten? You know, they didn't have any nuclear power plants to shut down practically, and the only one they had left, he bombed last summer. So what was accomplished here for anybody, right? If the goal is, if you think it's somehow a threat for Iran to have a peaceful nuclear energy program, I mean, they didn't have one to begin with, and now they don't have one now. Like, I mean, what was accomplished? This seems like a $300 billion waste of American taxpayer money, waste of human lives. This is absolutely ridiculous, and it actually kind of reminds me of that birthday bash. What was the point of that, right? So the president throws a big birthday party for himself with UFC fighters, and I mean, it seems like there's a lot of vanity spending in Washington, D.C. right now. You know, in art, they talk about there's commercial art that has commercial value. There's art that's like subsidized by the state, and then there's what they call vanity art, where the artist is basically just paying to put the art out there. You know, it doesn't even break even, really. The artist, you know, someone writes a book because they want to show their friends how smart they are, they want to experience artistic expression or whatever. I'm seeing vanity politics. I don't think this war on Iran served any other purpose than Trump feeling good about himself. I don't think this birthday bash, this big, you know, UFC fight in Washington, D.C. in front of the White House, I don't think this served any purpose other than that. I feel like we have a vanity presidency right now. You know, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of an economic stimulus. I mean, the government's spending money and, you know, hard times economically, but I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. This war in Iran accomplished nothing, even for those who might think, well, we need to you know, prevent Iran from getting peaceful nuclear energy. It did kill Iran's supreme leader, and it did solidify that the next generation of Iranians will be loyal to the revolution and have a renewed hatred for the United States. You know, but other than that, I don't see what was really accomplished here, and I don't understand how Trump could claim this deal is somehow better than the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. Because I mean, even from the anti-Iran perspective, I mean, what did they get out of this? I mean, this is absolutely crazy, and I wonder if this deal will even hold.
Well, it looks highly unlikely, as Israel is coming out and saying it's not going to change any of its plans concerning Lebanon, and this was a major sticking point of the whole Memorandum of Understanding. This is just happening as Trump is about to head for the G summit in France. There were protests on Sunday in Geneva because the protesters weren't given a permit to protest in Evian, France, where the summit is due to start. On the agenda, of course, is the U.S. Iran war because there's been massive economic fallout from the conflict involving higher energy, food and shipping and fertilizer costs. This is having a repercussion across the globe. The World Bank has lowered global growth forecasts while central banks are responding to inflationary pressures. Also, there's likely to be some discussion about the Ukraine war with Russia. What do you think we'll see out of this, and whether there'll be any movement on trying to bring an end to that war?
Well, at this point, in terms of Ukraine, Anna Paulina and Kirill Dmitriev and Russian President Putin have confirmed there is a peace deal for Iran that Russia is fine with and America is fine with. and it is Ukraine in official capacity, Zelensky, who is not agreeing to it. But that's really what that means is Zelensky's masters in London and in Paris and in Germany to a lesser extent, but mainly in London, are the ones who are holding up peace in Ukraine right now. They don't want peace in Ukraine. They fear a strong Russia. The greatest fear, let's be clear about this, the greatest fear of the British Empire for hundreds of years, going back to the 1700s even, was Germany and Russia together. That has always been the greatest fear, because if Germany and Russia were to be solid allies, then Britain would lose its influence over the European mainland. And Europe, Europe as a large continent, and then you have, Britain, which is an island. The British have wanted to maintain power and influence on the European mainland, and if Russia and Germany were to combine their strengths, they wouldn't have it. And that's why, this Nord Stream pipeline was such a big threat to the British, right? Not only was it cutting into the natural gas market, which is something a lot of British and American companies, companies, profit from, but it was a closer economic bond between the Germans and the Russians, and that is a great fear that has always existed. And I mean, you go through the history of World War I, World War II, but even before that, that has always been a big fear, and that the war in Ukraine, serves to keep distance between the EU countries and Russia, and it creates a barrier there, and that is very, very important for Britain's dominance in the energy markets and Britain's maintaining power on the European mainland. And if the European mainland were to start to pivot toward being friendlier toward Russia, Britain would be the ultimate loser. And that's why when King Charles came and spoke to the U.S. Congress, he didn't speak too much about politics. But what he did talk about was Ukraine, right? That this war serves geopolitical ends for the British. And that's why Kirill Dmitriev, who is the head of the Russian Foreign Direct Investment Fund, it was very important that at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, he signed a contract to start the designs for building a tunnel under the Bering Sea to connect Alaska to the Russian Far East. That's an important development. And the reason that Trump has raised noise about annexing Canada, and the reason that there's been, the trucker convoy protests in Western Canada, where the people there are more conservative, this is all related to kind of a battle within the elite about pivoting the U.S. economy westward and closer to Russia and closer to the Far East of Russia and closer to the Bering Sea and also closer to the Arctic versus the forces that would like the U.S. economy to remain tied in with Britain and the NATO countries and see Russia as the main focus. And it seems like to some degree or other, there are a lot of oil and gas people in Trump's camp, frackers and others, that would like to pivot closer to Russia, would like the U.S. economy to pivot westward, would like to, set up shop in Western Canada and expand American influence in Western Canada, would like to start exploring the Arctic as a place that they could get oil and gas and see Russia as a potential partner in that. And that seems to be a division. Now, you'll notice that last week there was an article in the Wall Street Journal hailing North Korea's economic miracle, saying that North Korea is the economic success story of the last couple of years. Now, that is not just an accident. And, the fact that the Wall Street Journal published that, it's not only true, but it's also, they made a decision to highlight that. And Donald Trump tweeted out the image of him with Kim Jong-un and said, oh, happy memories and all of that. And that there is a feeling that I don't think Trump is really necessarily friendly to Russia. I don't think Trump is necessarily friendly to North Korea. I think Trump and his allies don't like Europe. They don't like NATO. And they saw Obama as too soft on Britain and NATO and too soft on the Germans and too soft on the Belgians and Italy and all of that. And that within Trump's camp, there's a lot of people that want to pivot the United States out of kind of maintaining this alliance with Europe. And that may be what causes Trump to move ahead and end this war in Ukraine, though it seems like he will bear heavy political cost. Now, the economic fallout of this war with Iran has been devastating, and the European mainland countries, the EU countries, have suffered as a result of this. And I think Trump is quite happy about that. And he didn't include them in it. They were not part of the decision to attack Iran. And I think that, you know, in a way, they suffered economically with the high gas prices and all of this. And Trump is kind of, you know, celebrating that. That Trump and him, I mean, and it kind of reminds you of Bush, even though Bush and Trump's rhetoric is very different. You know, Bush did not like the NATO and EU allies, and Trump doesn't either. And it seems like that is one of the major differences between Republicans and Democrats, right? Is that Democrats want to get along with Europe and the NATO countries, and Republicans do not. And Republicans kind of go out of their way to diss those countries. They feel those countries are kind of holding back American interests. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we head towards the G7.
And just one other question before we let you go. So climate change has been largely excluded from the summit agenda. So I'm wondering about that. And then Europe is increasingly worried about Chinese industrial dominance, especially in electric vehicles, which is part of the climate change agenda, and advanced manufacturing. So could we be seeing the signs of a new economic Cold War with China?
Right. Well, China clearly has dominance when it comes to new energy vehicles. I mean, they make the car batteries, they have the rare earth minerals, they have dominance there. And I think there is a feeling on the part of the Trump camp. Well, first of all, there's a lot of people in the Republican camp that just don't believe in climate change, that believe it's, you know, a conspiracy. And especially when you talk about little oil, right? Not big oil, but like the Koch brothers and, you know, the fracking companies and all of that. They very much feel that talk of climate change enables laws to be passed, and those laws will be written by the big oil companies to maintain their monopoly. And so there's a lot of opposition to any talk of climate change from the little oil. You know, we have a lot of that in America. You go to Texas, there's a lot of little tiny oil companies that have like maybe one rich family that owns a certain amount of land, and, you know, they're millionaires because of oil, but they're certainly not the Rockefellers. They're certainly not the Carnegies and the DuPonts. They're just kind of a little oil Texas wealthy family. And there's a lot of that in America, little oil. And little oil has long been a source for far-right politics. And little oil in particular doesn't appreciate climate change rhetoric. And, you know, China relies on oil imports. They are an oil importing country. They produce very little inside of China, and they rely on oil imports in order to keep their economy going. So they're excited about any move off of oil is a step toward China's independence. That's one of China's ultimate weaknesses, is it has to import oil. And so I see that, yes, as a division there. I think you can absolutely say that. And one thing that is interesting is while the European mainland countries seem very hostile to Russia, they're much closer to China than America is, right? And that while there's many people in the Trump camp and in the Republican camp that are really, really anti-China and aren't so concerned about Russia, on the European mainland, they're happy to get along with China. The Vatican and China have a good relationship at this point. Many of the European mainland countries have joined China's Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank or entered some kind of cooperative agreement with China. They don't consider China to be a big threat. And I think, again, we're looking at minute differences within the ruling elite.
Caleb, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today on Frontline Voices. Glad to have you on the show as always.
Sure thing.
Yep. That was me giving my analysis on WBAI radio in the aftermath of this. So, yeah, I am giving a very tentative perspective regarding the Iran nuclear deal. We're going to have to see. And this is a very, very strange moment. But I must say that we at the Center for Political Innovation, we have been on the forefront of standing in solidarity with Iran. We had a national day of action on February 28th, which ended up being the day that this war began. We blocked the No Kings parade. We have been out there doing everything we can. Out in Minnesota and Los Angeles, people were saying no war with Iran, no war for bail. You know, I mean, our members all around the country have been on the forefront of opposing this war. And that actually brings me to the second item I wanted to talk about tonight, which is we have been at CPI, we've been raising money for our national gathering. We have a national gathering every summer, and it's our national 7-day program. Our national convention will be happening on the 15th. We're having this rally, France out of Africa, stand with the Union of Sahel States. We're having that the day before the convention on the 14th. we've been raising money for it. And in the past, we've used GoFundMe as a way to raise money. And unfortunately, GoFundMe made a ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous request of us this year. And Noah Schenk, who is our regional captain in the Northeast, he's from the Boston area. He comes to New York a lot. He did this special video message, which has been widely shared and promoted. This is Noah's message about GoFundMe. Basically asked us to dox every member of CPI. It was absolutely insane. Here's Noah's message.
GoFundMe just asked us to dox all our members. The Center for Political Innovation is having our national convention this year on August 15th in Chicago, Illinois. Unfortunately, having events like this costs money. They're not free, and they tend to be quite expensive with the need to rent out a venue, to fly in speakers like Scott Ritter and like Garland Nixon, who have spoken at our events in the past.
That's his question. Will you condemn Hamas? Hey, Pierce, invite me. I'll give you the answer. Hell no!
There's also the need to provide travel and housing accommodations for volunteers who come into town to facilitate the event. All in all, an event of this scale and of this nature costs tens of thousands of dollars, and we were planning on relying, at least partially, on grassroots donations supported through platforms like GoFundMe. Unfortunately, GoFundMe has decided that they don't want to platform people like us at the Center for Political Innovation who do the important work that we do. They pulled the fundraiser, citing concerns about our legitimacy as an NGO, and when provided with legal documentation supporting the fact that we are a business legally registered in the United States, they asked us to provide full names, legal names, dates of births, and addresses for every person who might attend such a conference. Now, what an objectively ridiculous request. And I think no other organization in this country would be subjected to this level of scrutiny and this invasion of privacy. And we at the Center for Political Innovation, of course, respect the privacy of our members and of our supporters and would never yield to such requests. And it makes you wonder why it is that we are being targeted in this way. And I think it's pretty clear when you take a look at the important work that we've done all around the world to support peace. Our members have attended World Youth Festivals and the Intervision Songwriting Contests to support peace with Russia. 2 of our members even speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our members have appeared on huge platforms like the Jimmy Dore Show to support an anti-imperialist message. Our members have intervened against politicians and at the No Kings rally. Members in LA have also appeared on huge social media platforms like the Really American podcast to support peace initiatives. In times like these, it is so desperately important that such a conference continue to happen. And we at the Center for Political Innovation are dedicated to making it happen in spite of the censorship from platforms like GoFundMe, although they don't want to facilitate it. We ask that if you could follow the link in the description, cpiusa.org/donate, to donate whatever you can to make sure that this event still happens. Because right now it is more important than ever that the work that we do at the Center for Political Innovation continue to have a platform and that it continue to happen and that this conference happens to make clear that the enemies of the American people are not in Tehran, they're not in Beijing, and they're not in Moscow. The enemies of the American people are on Wall Street, and they're in the city of London. But the American people don't want war, they want development. What we need is a government of action that fights for working families, and we are committed to making that happen. And we hope that you can help us to do that and help us to make sure that this conference can still happen. Thanks for watching.
All right. So, yeah, tweet out this video if you can. People should know how ridiculous GoFundMe was. They wanted us to give the name and addresses. And if you go to the CPI website, it's linked in the tweet, you can actually read. I have the screenshots all there. They wanted us to give the name, birth date, and address of every single member of CPI, every person who might attend our convention. That is so ridiculous, so utterly ridiculous and insulting. I mean, would you ask any other political organization to do that? Completely crazy. And so obviously that's making it hard for us to fundraise. We need people to donate to the Center for Political Innovation. We urgently need donations. We're trying to figure out how we can do things. I am hoping to go to the Uhuru court date, that's coming up in Georgia, the appeals proceedings. We're trying to figure out how to raise the money for that. We're trying to figure out how to get the Airbnb reserved for our 7-day program. We're trying to figure out how to get all the expenses. We do need donations now, and it's getting a little urgent. And, if people can send contributions, it would make our lives a lot easier. And so please, at the very least, please share this video. Tweet out this video. It's on my Facebook. You can share it from my Facebook page. We've got a link on the CPI website that has all the screenshots of what GoFundMe tried to do to us, basically asking us to dox our members. We can share that. You can share that link to the article on our website. But we do need your help. We really do need your help right now. So if you can help us by sharing these videos, sharing the articles, or you can send us a direct contribution, we would really, really, really appreciate that. And I just want to emphasize that we really could use your support right now. Things are getting a little bit tight and stressful, and we're figuring out how it is that we're going to make things happen this summer. Now, maybe with the Strait of Hormuz opening, things will be less expensive. I don't know. We just got to focus on having a successful event in Chicago. So any support you can send us would really, really make me less stressed out. And it would make all of us in CPI very happy. So I wanted to, I guess I'll mention also, if you got any questions for the second half of the show, I got one more thing I wanted to talk about. I got a little slideshow for you all tonight. But if you got any questions for me to answer in the second half of the show, buymeacoffee.com, you can Rumble rant, you can, super chat, whatever you want to do. But anyway, I wanted to end my opening remarks tonight with a little bit of a slideshow because, we have interesting insights here at the Center for Political Innovation. And I have recently, in a lot of my stuff, I've been talking about counter gangs and manipulation. I've also talked about political mass movements and the psychology behind them. So I actually had an idea. And tonight, I'm going to give you a slideshow. And tonight's slideshow is called David versus Goliath, the political and psychological aspects of an ancient story. Right, the story of David and Goliath, a Hebrew story going back to thousands of years. The story of the Philistine Goliath and David, who eventually became king of Israel, and how they had their fight, the giant fighting the little shepherd boy. And I'm going to share that story with you all, but there's a lot in that story, not simply in terms of the story itself, but in terms of why it speaks to people and what it says about politics and about the world. So we're going to talk about the political and psychological aspects of the ancient story. So the story is in the Bible. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And basically, quick summary, the Philistines have a giant soldier named Goliath who is challenging the Israelites to fight him in hand-to-hand single combat. Basically, the two armies face each other, and their giant guy, Goliath, challenges the Israelites to send one guy out to fight him. David is a young shepherd boy, and he delivers food to his older brothers in the army who mock him and tell him he does not belong on the battlefield. And he sees Goliath there challenging the Israelis to send out one guy to fight them, the Israelites to send out one guy to fight them in hand-to-hand combat. So David volunteers to fight Goliath. The king is skeptical, and he offers David all kinds of armor and weaponry to fight Goliath. David says, I don't need it, not interested. The fight happens, and David kills Goliath with a single shot from his sling, rendering Israel victorious. And then David eventually goes on to become an important military leader based on doing this. And eventually he's the king of Israel, establishing Jerusalem. That's the story as it is in the Bible. Now, what can we take from this? Important details. One, Social mobility was very uncommon in these times, but yet David went from shepherd to king, and his origin story had a lot to do with it. David, the shepherd boy who was already famous for being a skilled musician prior to fighting Goliath. And that's, previously in the Bible, the story is that the king Saul was, having trouble sleeping and was mentally unwell. And they found David, the shepherd boy, who was very, very good at playing the lyre, like a little harp. And he was very, very good at playing the harp. And that brought peace to the king. And that's how he had an in at the palace to say, I'll fight Goliath, which is also very interesting. So he was a shepherd who took care of his sheep, but he also played the lyre, the harp, very, very well. And on top of that, he apparently had practiced using his sling to protect his flock of sheep from animals. Now, the story also points out that it was ultimately the prophet Samuel who anointed David to be the king. After killing Goliath, David moved up the ranks, became an important leader of the Israelites' military, and eventually he, became the king of Israel. Now, the Oedipal complex. Sigmund Freud tells us about the tension between teenage boys and their fathers. When a teenage boy hits adolescence, he begins to challenge his father's patriarchal authority. Freud argued that every teenage boy has a desire to kill his mother or kill his father and marry his mother and become the man of the house. Meanwhile, every father feels very threatened by a teenage son. He fears that he's getting old and that his masculinity is fading, and so he is threatened, and he works to establish dominance over the teenage son by trying to castrate his teenage son. And that this is something that goes on. The Oedipal dynamic is part of the family dynamic, that as young men are getting older, they challenge their father's authority in order to assert their masculinity. The father is threatened by that, seeks to castrate the son in order to maintain his dominance, and that this is just part of natural development. This is what Sigmund Freud taught us. Well, Goliath is a giant warrior, right? He's a giant soldier, and you could argue that Goliath is a symbol of masculine authority, right? When a child is little, the adults all look like giants in comparison to them. Goliath is supposed to be this big giant soldier. You could argue Goliath is a stand-in for the father figure, the stand-in for masculine authority. Meanwhile, David's older brothers taunting him when he delivers their food, and he delivers their food to. The story is that he delivers food to them at the battlefield. David's older brothers, and they say, "Oh, why are you here delivering food? You're just a shepherd boy." They're saying he's not as strong and powerful as they are. They're bullying him a bit, questioning his masculinity, saying he's not as big and strong as them to be a warrior. Right? And you can argue that that's kind of a castration and a humiliation that he's subjected to. And then ultimately, David defeating Goliath is satisfying for everyone to hear about, right? Everyone who hears the story of David defeating Goliath applauds. Go, David! Because David is the underdog. He is defeating the oppressor, right? He is the part of us that wants to rebel against our patriarchal masculine father figure being deleted. Youthful male energy triumphs over patriarchal masculine oppression. This story is very, very, very Oedipal, right? And this is, you can think it's true or you can think it's not true. There's a reason that this is one of people's most favorite Bible stories. This is a story that people identify with, right? The underdog defeats the giant. The little boy defeats the giant. He doesn't have any weaponry. He just has his little slingshot, right? It speaks to us. It absolutely speaks to us. It's a lot of people's favorite story. And I'm sure there's many stories in many traditions that this speaks to. It's a story that speaks to psychological dynamics more than anything, and that's what I'm getting at. Now, it's a winning political strategy. With his reputation as a humbled shepherd boy who defeated Goliath, David rose to be a prominent military leader and eventually the king. People identified with David in the story, seeing him as enacting their own victory over humiliation, oppression, and feelings of being weak. Everyone who's ever been angry with their father, angry with someone who's bullied them, felt that they were being, treated unfairly by those who might be bigger and stronger by them. They were happy to hear about David striking down Goliath. It speaks to a part of the human experience. Everyone wants Goliath to be defeated. Everyone wants David to win. Now, the narrative of David and Goliath also emphasizes that God enabled David to defeat someone much larger than him, and that David's belief in God was essential in making it happen, right? This translates to a message of emphasizing willpower, loyalty, and confidence as something both useful for social institutions and something many individuals strive for. People strive to be more confident and to believe. And we're told that David believed that he could defeat Goliath. And even though Goliath was 10 times bigger than him, he said, I can do it. I'm confident I can do it. God's got it all worked out for me. I'm set. And he walked onto the battlefield to face somebody who was huge, physically huge, and he was sure that he would win. And in fact, he turned down, they offered him armor and weapons. He said, no, I don't need that, right? Everyone wants to be confident. And so David gives voice to the confidence that we all strive to have, but there's more to it. It's not simply that David is confident. It's that he has the willpower to force himself into what had to have been a scary situation, right? Facing a guy who was huge in front of 2 giant armies, thousands and thousands of people watching, facing off with a giant, right? On top of that, it is believed that his belief, his loyalty to God and to the religious institution is what empowered him to do it. So the story is fulfilling for us in that David is what we all want to be. He's standing up for himself. He's confident. He's not afraid. And on top of that, it's very useful to social institutions. It's saying if you follow the rules, if you truly believe what you're taught, and if you force yourself, you have the willpower to do what we want you to do, even in tough situations, you can accomplish a great victory. So it's useful for social institutions. It's also useful for individuals. This is a great story. It has all the dynamics of a great story that, governing bodies and social institutions would want you to hear it. You want to hear it. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves to cheer for David. Everyone loves to see David kill Goliath. It's exactly what we all want. It's a winning political strategy. Now, what's interesting is that David and Goliath has particular value in modernity. Modernity began with the French Revolution, what we call modernity. I think it was who was it who said this is the birth of the modern world? The birth of the modern world. Who said that? We have witnessed the birth of the modern world, right? Who knows, right? I guess Karl Marx is quoted as saying in 1642, the modern world was born. There was somebody else who said we are seeing the beginning of the modern world. The birth of the modern world. The modern world begins in the time in which feudalism is being overthrown, at the time of the French Revolution, all the way up into the end of the Second World War. And then they say we're now in post-modernity. But up until the end of the Second World War is what they call the modern world. From the time of the French Revolution and the dawn of capitalism all the way up into the end of the Second World War, they call that modernity. Now, leftism as a political movement originated during the French Revolution. And leftism emphasized the unleashing of restrained sexual impulses and rebellion and vengeance against perceived oppressors. Right? In the French Revolution, the main thing was they took the father of the nation, the king, and they cut his head off. They chopped his head off. And he was the father of the nation. They killed the father. It was the Oedipal rage. But on top of that, the French Revolution was also about sex. It was very much about sex. The Marquis de Sade was considered one of the main agitators of the French Revolution, and he argued that in order to keep the revolution going, they needed to set up theaters where naked women would be on display so that men would look at their bodies and be sexually aroused and be committed to continuing the revolution. And the color red started out with the red caps that the Jacobins would wear, but it eventually became the red flag. The red red became the symbol of the French Revolution. And red is the color of blood. It is the color of anger. It is also the color of sexual passion. Red is a color of libido, of the sex drive and the drive toward aggression. And the French Revolution was very much an unleashing of Oedipal and libidinal impulses. You want to take revenge against perceived oppressors. You want to kill your father and assert your manhood. You want to unleash your sexual desires. You want to unleash and let out your anger and aggression. That's what leftism is associated with. And the terms left and right began after the French Revolution, where the more conservative people that were still loyal to the king sat on the right side of the National Assembly, and those who were fully embracing the French Revolution sat on the right. And left and right go back to the French Revolution. The Jacobins were the leftists, and the Girondists that were slightly more conservative, they sat on the right. Now, in 1848, you had the Spring of Nations, where all across Europe there were uprisings inspired by the French Revolution that took place trying to overthrow feudalism and establish modern nation states. And 1848 is the year of the failed German Revolution. That's where the communist movement comes from. That's the year the Communist Manifesto was published by Karl Marx and his supporters in Germany. That's when there were revolts all over Europe demanding the creation of democratic republics. And that's when leftism became a modern current. Well, you can see how the story of David and Goliath has a lot to do with leftism, right? I mean, it's Oedipal, right? It's the downtrodden, the oppressed, the little people standing up against the big, mighty oppressors and winning, right? It is the weak against the strong, asserting themselves, asserting their humanity. And you can see the story of David and Goliath very much speaks to leftism. And it worked for David, right? David was able to establish himself and eventually become the king of the country because he had a story, an origin story, if you will, that spoke to what people were experiencing, right? Everyone could identify with the David and Goliath story, and that made David very popular. Everyone wanted to support David. Now, this gets very interesting in the era of modernist political leaders. In the 20th century, the height of modernity, major political figures all told stories of an oppressive father figure. In previous epochs, leaders wanted to have a high-achieving, good father, right? The idea was you judged people by their family. So if you wanted to be a great leader, you didn't tell people you had an awful, awful father who was a big oppressor. No, you said, I have an amazing father who's a brilliant man. He's a high-achieving person, and that shows that I am also a high-achieving person. That's the way people tended to think about parent-child relationships, about family and lineage. Blood lineage is a very important part of feudalism. In feudal society, you were born into your position, right? Whatever your parents' job is, that is what your job is. But yet, as we enter modernity, and especially at the height of modernity in the 20th century, all of a sudden, all the great political figures, all the major leaders of mass modernist political movements, all are telling stories about how they had this awful, oppressive father figure. Winston Churchill, his autobiography tells about how his father was an abusive person. He then tells the story of this awful schoolmaster he had who beat him mercilessly and punished him for no reason, and he was horrifically abused in school. And that Winston Churchill, his autobiographies all tell of, oh my goodness, I was so badly treated growing up. And that makes him a very, very popular politician in Britain. Very interesting, right? You'd think that, in a previous time, someone would say, well, my father was a great, great person, and he taught me to be a great, great leader. That's not what Winston Churchill does. You would also think he would say, oh, my teachers all loved me, and I was a high-achieving student, and that's why I'm going to be the leader of the country. That's not what he does. Winston Churchill tells the story of constantly being harshly punished in school, having teachers that hated him. What's going on there? Well, whether or not this is true is not the point. Winston Churchill is telling a story that speaks to people. And it's the same story that we hear from both Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, right? Stalin, his father was an alcoholic and who beat up his mother. They were separated. His father wanted him to be a bootmaker, but his beloved mother wanted him to be a priest and sent him to seminary school. Mao Zedong, if you read Red Star over China, the book that popularized Mao Zedong, written by American journalist Edgar Snow. Mao tells stories of fighting with his father, making alliances with his mother and sister against his father. It's this story of rebelling against parental authority, about how his father was an oppressor, and that Mao Zedong in particular, as a high school principal and as somebody who then recruits teenagers largely to run away from home and join his revolutionary movement in the countryside. Oedipal stuff is really, really important to Mao Zedong. And in fact, the Cultural Revolution was, again, it was teenagers, Red Guards who went out. Mao really speaks to the teenage Oedipal feelings of rebellion. That's what Mao Zedong is all about. And Mao Zedong has this story about how his father was oppressing him. Adolf Hitler, right? Adolf Hitler, a leader of modernity. He's somebody who's, considered to be on the political right wing, kind of like Winston Churchill, not a leftist. Stalin and Mao are communists on the left. Hitler is on the right. Winston Churchill is on the right, but they have the same story. Adolf Hitler, if you read Mein Kampf, his autobiography, it's all about how his father wanted him to be a government official and he wanted to be a painter, and he was crushed. His father was cruel to him and didn't want to let him be a painter, so he ran away from home. And he went to Vienna and he tried to go to art school and he wasn't able to get into art school. And so he was homeless, and he painted houses as a house painter, and he was homeless. But then he fought in World War I, and it was a greatly meaningful experience. It was Valhalla and Odin, and it was this great spiritual experience he had fighting in World War I. That's Hitler's story. And actually, that aspect of Hitler's story, which, again, this reminds you, it's all a kind of rags to riches story. It's also a story of, I was oppressed by my authoritarian father, and I rose up from nothing. That's the story of a modernist leader. It's David and Goliath. David is just a poor shepherd boy, and his brothers are mean to him, but yet he's able to go and fight Goliath and rise up from nothing to be a military leader and eventually king of the whole nation. This is David and Goliath. This is David and Goliath's story. Now, Goliath wasn't fighting his actual father, but it's a similar thing. And this speaks very much to the human experience, right? Now, interestingly, I didn't realize until I did some research how much that was part of Hitler, right? I assumed that, but Hitler's autobiography and his narrative that I was once a homeless veteran and now I am the leader of the country, that my dad kicked me out of the house because I didn't want to be a government official, and I ran away to be a painter, and now look at me, I used to be homeless and now I'm the leader of the nation. That's a huge part of Hitler. And in fact, this is one of Hitler's most important speeches after he took office at the Siemens military factory, at the Siemens factory. He gave this speech. And this is one of his most important speeches that he delivered. This was after he had just taken office. He wore a suit and tie rather than his Nazi uniform. This is a clip from it. This shows you how important this was to the whole Hitler narrative.
To you today, and in doing so address millions of other diligent German workers, both men and women, who contribute so much to our nation. I believe I have a more profound and legitimate right to do so than anyone else, given my unique position and experiences. I have grown up from among you. I have stood among you myself. For 4.5 years of war, I was once again right among you. And then, through hard work, through learning, and I can say through hunger, I slowly worked my way up. In my innermost being, I have always remained what I was before. However, I did not count myself among those who, at that time, turned against the interests of their own nation. I was convinced that the fate of the nation had to be represented, or else the entire people would sooner or later suffer terribly within the state. When a man makes a name for himself through his own efforts, a name that every child in the nation knows, then he doesn't need a title, he doesn't require... I came and took on this significant position with only one overarching thought: to finally put into practical application what I had consistently preached for many years.
Yeah, you heard that. If a man comes as far as I have, he doesn't need a title. He doesn't need a title. And I was among you, and I worked my way up. It's a rags to riches story. David and Goliath, right? And it's very interesting. So the David and Goliath story is, if you want to understand effective politics, especially in the age of modernity, the story of David and Goliath that happens 4,000 years earlier is really, really, really important. Now, this is from William S. Lind. And William S. Lind is a Pentagon strategist. And this is from his Handbook of Fourth Generation Warfare, which I have read, and I quote a lot. William S. Lind was one of the main architects of the surge in Iraq, and his book on fourth generation warfare specifically speaks to David and Goliath. And this is what he writes, quote, "The military historian Martin van Creveld compares a state military that, with its vast superiority and lethality, continually turns its firepower on a poorly equipped fourth generation opponents to an adult who administers a prolonged, violent beating to a child in a public place. Regardless of how bad the child has been or how justified the beating may be, every observer sympathizes with the child. Soon, outsiders interfere, and the adult is arrested. The power mismatch is so great that the adult's action is judged a crime. In the 3,000 years the story of David and Goliath has been told, how many listeners have identified with Goliath?" Now, right there, William S. Lind is making a point. He's arguing about counterinsurgency and the optics of counterinsurgency. He's saying, look, when the mighty American army is battling Iraqis or battling the Vietnamese people, people see the what does he call it? He says the mismatching or the mismatch of power. People see the mismatch of power is so great that people sympathize with the Iraqis or with the Vietnamese. And also he makes it Oedipal, right? It's about a child getting a beating, right? So even William S. Lind, before he gets to David and Goliath, he's talking about parent-child, discipline and things like that. So even he makes it into an Oedipal thing. And he compares it. And if you read the Handbook of Fourth Generation Warfare, what it argues is that you cannot, if you want to wage a successful counterinsurgency, you cannot let a David and Goliath scenario unfold. And that's the same thing that Frank Kitson argues. Frank Kitson, who I've referenced a lot, do I have a picture of Frank Kitson? He was the architect of British counterinsurgency operations. And Frank Kitson talked about how you cannot, this is one of the most brutal murderers that, you'll see in history. This is the guy who oversaw the the putting down of the Landed Freedom Army in Kenya. This is one of the main people involved in the British Empire's strategy to defeat the Irish Republican Army in the 1970s and 80s. This is a guy who killed thousands and thousands of people and tortured people and was the art of successfully defeating insurgencies. But his whole argument is that if you want to defeat a group of insurgents, you cannot let a David and Goliath scenario ensue. And Frank Kitson coined the term counter gang, right? And that's a concept we've talked about on these streams quite a bit. And I even wrote the little book, What is a Counter Gang? That's really a big part of our understanding. Counter gangs were what were used to fight the Mau Mau in Kenya. In Kenya, a group, the black Africans, were rising up against the British occupiers. And it was a bit of a problem because the population largely sided with the Mau Mau, or the Landed Freedom Army, against the mighty British Empire. So what Frank Kitson did is he created counter gangs, groups of black Africans that looked like Landed Freedom Army fighters, that looked like Mau Mau, who were actually agents of the British and would sow confusion. They would commit false flag atrocities. They would spread disinformation. They would collect intelligence. And that by using counter gangs to disrupt the insurgency of the Mau Mau Landed Freedom Army, they were able to defeat it. And what did they do? They distorted the David versus Goliath scenario. And if you look at insurgencies that are successful, a great example is the Vietnam War. The Vietnamese National Liberation Front was successful. Why? Well, they became David versus Goliath. They were the Vietnamese people heroically going out and fighting the U.S. occupiers. One of the stories, one of the facts about the Vietnam War that is largely left out of the history books, and only one Vietnam War movie acknowledges this, which is Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket does acknowledge this, but no other Vietnamese Vietnam War movie touches on this. The army that defeated the American empire in Vietnam was an army of women. It was an army of women, largely. 2/3 of the Vietnamese National Liberation Front's fighters were women. And why was that? Well, that was because the USA assumed women wouldn't be fighters and tended to round up or detain or watch all the men. And so it was women who did the bulk of the fighting. And that's not in the movie Full Metal Jacket. There's kind of a surprise ending that shows that. But it's a fact that is not largely acknowledged. And so not largely acknowledged. In fact, this is a famous photo that became popular during the Vietnam War among anti-war activists. And again, it just kind of captures a David versus Goliath aesthetic, except in this case, Goliath is female. Right? This is a very famous photo that anti-Vietnam War activists used to hold up. Let me pull it on the screen here. I'm just waiting for it to load. But yeah, it's a very famous photo. Right? And it's supposed to kind of incarnate the David versus Goliath aesthetic that the Vietnamese very much captured. Let me just put it on the screen. All right, here it is. All right. Yeah. All right. So you have an American GI, a very large American soldier, taken prisoner by a very short Vietnamese woman. Right. And that is supposed to symbolize the David versus Goliath nature of the fight. And the Vietnamese won. And they won because they made it about David versus Goliath. And the population was cheering for them, and the whole world was cheering for them, and they won. And the same could be said for the French resistance in Algeria. The population of Algeria was battling against the mighty French Empire, and they won, right? I'm sure many people love it, just like we love the story of David and Goliath. It's a very empowering thing, right? It's about anyone who's ever felt weak, anyone who's ever been bullied, everyone who's ever felt oppressed feels empowered by the story of David and Goliath, or feels empowered by seeing this short Vietnamese woman holding this large American GI captive, right? It feels very, very inspiring. This is the psychology. This is how these things work. Now, successful counterinsurgencies, though, have the opposite. And if you look at successful counterinsurgencies in Kenya, the way Frank Kitson was able to defeat the Mau Mau was by confusing them, by making it not clear who was David and who was Goliath, and having Goliath stand back and having the Davids fight each other and creating 5 or 6 different Davids. So nobody knew who the real David was, lots of confusion, and Goliath just kind of wins by default. And that is the main counterinsurgency strategy, the art of confusion used, and this was used in Northern Ireland. This is how the IRA was defeated, right? The IRA was defeated because the same guy, Frank Kitson, developed counterinsurgency tactics to have the IRA fight against Protestant gangs. So it became an ethnic conflict, Protestants versus Catholics, rather than the British state fighting against the Irish people. And on top of that, they confused the IRA. They funded ultra-left groups. They funded rival IRA factions. They got the IRA involved with drug gangs. They infiltrated the IRA from within and purged the IRA and enabled people to rise up the ranks of the IRA that were the people that they could predict their behavior. The British government was able to defeat the IRA by making sure it didn't become a David versus Goliath scenario. And that's what this evil genius guy, Frank Kitson, figured out to do, how to do. And if you look at Jamaica in the 1970s, and if you look at Italy during the years of lead, which is a topic we've talked about on these streams quite a bit, I argue that they're trying to foment an American years of lead when Italy was going to leave NATO, right? It could have been the Italian people as David versus NATO and the U.S. empire as Goliath, but they were able to confuse them and make it about all kinds of confusing political violence, left versus right, red brigades versus communists versus fascists versus the Italian social movement. And that was how they were able to stay on top, by avoiding a David versus Goliath scenario, right? The light switch effect, right? A light switch is either on or it's off. There's no in between. That's what counterinsurgency experts don't want. They don't want a David versus Goliath scenario, and they don't want a light switch effect. And that is how counterinsurgency is waged. However, I want to get to another aspect of this, because a lot of people don't realize this. And, we generally think of the story of David and Goliath as only starting when, David shows up and decides to fight Goliath. But before that, before David was a warrior, he was a musician. Isn't that interesting? And music requires discipline. And back in these times, music was very, very different. Nowadays, we hear music all day long. You turn on the TV, there's music coming out of your phone. You go into a store, they've got music on. Music is all around us. There were no recordings back then. There was no electricity back then. On top of that, there was no notation back then. There was no sheet music back then. Music was a very, very different thing in the ancient world than it is today. But yet, even in the ancient world, people realized the psychological power of music. Plato, in his book, The Republic, said, quote, "Music is moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and charm and gaiety to life and everything. And when the modes of music change, the fundamental laws of the state change with them." So this is back in ancient times, before there's any recordings, before there's any notes even. People realize music has amazing impact, and that when music changes, the way the government works changes, and that music has a big, big, big impact on society as a whole. Music is really, really important, and to be a skilled musician requires a huge amount of discipline and self-control. And David, in this ancient time when there were no notes, there were no music teachers, there wasn't music everywhere, David probably taught himself to play the harp, and was so good at playing the harp that they invited him to play for the king, and that his music soothed the king and enabled the king to sleep. This is very, very, very interesting stuff. In addition to that, prior to killing Goliath, David not only was a skilled musician, but David perfected his skills killing wild animals to protect the flock of sheep, right? And he frequently... he killed bears, he killed lions, and he was practicing using the sling to kill wild animals and was very, very good at it. I guess, he had a lot of free time just sitting there watching the sheep. While he was watching the sheep, he was spending all his time learning to play the harp and learning to shoot and hit exactly with his sling. So David is a very, very disciplined person. On top of that, David rejected the armor, he rejected the weapons, but instead he pioneered a new method of warfare, innovating new technology. And this is also very interesting, right? If Goliath had thought someone could show up with a sling and, hit me with a thing, Goliath would not have allowed the fight to take place on those terms. He would have made, he said, I will fight any of you one-on-one. He would have said, no slingshots, no slings. But he didn't say that. David was clearly innovating a new form of technology. He had, for whatever reason, slings were not widely used in warfare at this time. And at the time, people fought with swords, people fought with spears, people fought with armor, but they didn't fight with slings. So David innovated new military technology. So he's a very disciplined person, He's disciplined enough to become an amazing musician. He's disciplined enough to become a precise shot with a sling. He's innovating new military technology. And then on top of all of this, he has confidence. David said to the Philistine, "You come at me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of Lord God Almighty and the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." So, even though the story of David and Goliath seems very Oedipal, right? It's like we're taking revenge, we're taking down the oppressor, we're rebelling. It's actually not. David did not have a fit of Oedipal rage. Rather, he was a very, very, very disciplined person who refined a skill in both music and new military technology. And he became so confident that he was able to calmly carry out an effective operation at crunch time and take down Goliath. Well, think about that. That doesn't fit, right? The story of David and Goliath, it's supposed to be all of us, oh, we've been taking it for too long. I'm so tired of this big bully oppressing us. We're going to let it all out. That's not what David did. In fact, he did the opposite. David was so disciplined and so self-controlled. He played his harp so perfectly. He learned exactly how to carry out and shoot his sling. And he pioneered invented a new weapon, right? It was almost like somebody who invented a new missile or a new drone or something, but he invented an entirely new weapon. And he was so disciplined and so skilled and so controlled in what he did that he could calmly walk out onto the battlefield, calmly look someone so much bigger than him in the face and say, "I'm going to kill you, motherfucker," and take him down in one shot, right? So David is not out of control. He's not having a rage. If anything, he's one of the most kind of cold and confident people. You could almost say that David was the stereotype of being autistic, right? An autistic person is very, very fixated, very, very fixated. Well, in order to become a skilled harpist in these ancient times where there were no harp teachers, he didn't have a harp instructor, in order to invent a new weapon, you have to be kind of fixated and autistic. And you have to be kind of cold and calculating. David is, even though the perception that we have of David is that this is a fit of Oedipal rage, this is all of us that have ever felt bullied, ever felt oppressed, letting our anger out, that's not what David is doing. In fact, David is the opposite. He's this autistic, kind of emotionless person who is so intensely interested, and he learns to play the harp all by himself. He develops and invents an entirely new weapon all by himself. David is almost some kind of autistic, fixated, and emotionless genius. And in fact, he's able to walk out onto a battlefield in front of thousands of people and face down a guy who's 10 times his size and say, you ain't got nothing on me, because, and make this statement. David is not all of us. In fact, David is a very exceptional individual. He's not a normal person at all. And even though we feel that he is giving voice to sentiments that we all have, he's actually not. David's experience is completely different than most normal people. Most normal people in ancient Israel don't have time to learn to play the harp. Most normal people in ancient Israel are not inventing a new weapon. Most normal people in ancient Israel don't have the confidence to walk out in front of thousands of people and face down a guy who's 10 times their size and make this bold statement and hit him. Most people don't have the confidence to do any of that. David is not a normal person, but he develops a narrative that captures the experience of most normal people, right? And that's what's crazy about this. Even though he's completely abnormal, and there's nothing normal about David. David is like as abnormal as you can get. He's a genius. He's probably, some kind of obsessive autistic guy. I mean, he's not a normal person in any way. There's no way he could be a normal person. But yet the narrative that we all have around David is that he was a normal person. He was a completely normal guy. I am angry at my father. I am angry at the bully who bullied me. And that's David. David is me. Everyone identifies with David. He develops a narrative and a simplistic understanding that everyone can wrap their minds around. Very, very interesting. And you could say that as David captures the Oedipal feelings of all his contemporaries with an origin story, but David was in reality a skilled, disciplined practitioner, not merely a rebel. And furthermore, in order to conquer Goliath, David has to conquer his own mind. And that David is almost an example of when we talk about the Leninist vanguard party, or the concept of the mass line versus the party line. The mass line of David is he's just like me, and he is just like me. I've felt the world is unfair to me before. I've been bullied. I've been kicked around. David fought Goliath. He's just like me. That's the mass line. That's what everyone thought about David, and that's why they all were excited to have him be the leader of the military, and they eventually accepted him as the king of Israel because he had a mass line. There was a mass understanding of David. But that's not who David really was. And in fact, David was very much the opposite. David was a technological innovator. David was a skilled musician at a time that was a huge feat for an individual to take on. So in a sense, David is a vanguard political party. The Leninist concept of the vanguard party is the idea is the vanguard party is a highly disciplined organization. A highly disciplined organization, a party of new type, of people who give the whole of their lives to the revolution, but they then develop a mass line that captures the sentiments of everybody. And David, you could say he's a mini vanguard party. He is a highly disciplined, highly obsessed person, but yet he's able to develop a mass line of, I'm you. I'm just like you. Everyone has Oedipal feelings. And they all find their Oedipal feelings enacted in David. But yet David is actually something, in order to be David, he can't just be Oedipal rage unleashed. David has to be this highly disciplined. David is something so much more complex. Most people can't understand. Nobody can be David. Very, very few people are capable of being a David, but yet everyone thinks they're David. Everyone identifies with David. David has a mass line and David has a party line, right? David is a highly disciplined professional revolutionary who cultivates a mass line advocating what the sentiments of millions of people want, right? This is fascinating, right? It's really, really fascinating. The story of David and Goliath has within it many, many big political messages. And ultimately, the way that David is able to do what he does is he ultimately has to force himself to focus so much and become so obsessed that he can play music, so obsessed that he develops a new weapon, and so focused that he has no fear and can walk into a very, very dangerous situation and can do exactly what he's practiced doing exactly right. You know, I think about some of the sports, gymnastics, for example. Gymnastics. What is gymnastics? Well, gymnastics is the gymnast has a routine, and they do it in practice over and over and over again. But they're not judged on what they do in practice. They're judged on what they do at crunch time on the day of the meet. And the same for ice skating. Ice skaters practice over and over and over again, but they don't get a prize for what they do in practice. They get a prize for what they do at the ice skating competition. And that's David, right? He practiced shooting that sling over and over and over again, but it didn't count. It counted when he hit Goliath in the head, right? And that David is conquering himself and carrying out the perfect form and being unaffected by the audience that's watching him, being unaffected by the stakes of the situation. If he doesn't kill Goliath, Goliath is going to kill him. And he's able to just perform on command. That's what Goliath is. He's able to carry out an operation very, very effectively. And through practice, through obsession, and through conquering his own emotions, his own anxieties, whatever, he's able to just become focused, perfect a skill, and ultimately carry out an operation. And it was David's ability to do that made him a successful musician, right? Because how did he learn to play the harp so well? And he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And then how did he learn to become so effective with the sling? Again, he practiced and practiced and practiced and developed a confidence at the same time. And so he was able to become David. So the story of David and Goliath has a lot of psychological and political lessons in it. And I thought that might be worth sharing, and I hope people appreciate that, right? David enacts the Oedipal drive within all of us. He gives voice to it. That's why the story is so popular, number one. What else? David David speaks to and cultivates an image that has enabled a lot of people to rise to power in politics. On top of that, David, in reality, is nothing like what we think of him as. And he's actually a very skilled person who developed the discipline to be a musician, the discipline to develop and invent a new military weapon and effectively carry it out. This is all very important. So I wanted to share that with all of you. And I hope that you all found that to be insightful. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Jake in Portland, Oregon. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? We got Jenny in Cincinnati. Good to see you, Jenny. We got Dayton, Ohio, Brian. We got Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Irene from Brooklyn. Good to see you, Irene. Jane from New Zealand. Marvin in New Jersey. Good to see you. Good to see you. Michael from La Rochelle, France. Arlene from Milwaukee. Good to see you. Good to see you. We got Christopher in Florida. We got Chad in Spokane. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see everybody tonight. Good to see you. Samuel from the Far East says, God bless you. Well, thank you, Samuel. I hope that I'm able to get on a train and come see you soon, and that Bering Sea Tunnel is done. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Going once, going twice. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Antarctica. Or Arctica. All right. So I don't think we have any Buy Me a Coffees that have come in. There might be some. There might be like one that came in before. I don't know. We don't have any Buy Me a Coffees that have come in. So there's no Buy Me a Coffees. No Super Chats have come in. No one's got any questions. I'll give you all a chance to ask some questions. But yeah, Super Chats are appreciated. Rumble Rants are appreciated. Any questions? Give me something to talk about here in the second half of the show. If not, this is going to end. And that's dumb. We haven't even gone for 2 hours. Y'all can come up with some stuff to ask me about. So shoot me some questions. Shoot me some questions. In the meantime, we will put on some music. We will put on some music. I feel like putting on some Cornelius Cardew music because I am reading, I am making my way through, and I'm almost done with a biography of Cornelius Cardew. Folks, Cornelius Cardew is something very, very unique to our community. He is rather obscure. I have not met that many people in my life who know who Cornelius Cardew is. And there is a 1,000-page biography of Cornelius Cardew that has not sold that many copies, and I've been reading it, and I'm loving it. I find it fascinating. Cornelius Cardew was the founder of the Scratch Orchestra, the experimental music composition body in Britain. He became a very, very well-known avant-garde experimental musician, and then he became a communist. And for the last 10 years of his life, before his death in like 1981, he focused on communism and using his music to promote communist politics. And he was a communist political activist. And I am making my way through this biography of Cornelius Cardew. I am absolutely loving it. I am absolutely loving it. And I'm learning a lot from it. And Cornelius Cardew's music has always spoken to me. A lot of people hate it. I discovered it when I was a member of the Workers' World Party, and I played it for many other communists, and they said, this is shit. This is utter shit. And I enjoyed it because the lyrics were very forced. The lyrics are a little bit, how do I put it? The lyrics are a little corny, and so I'm kind of appreciating the lyrics with my tongue in my cheek a little bit. But also, there's an optimism that flows through it. And I found out why that was, is because, like me, Cornelius Cardew was very anti-Malthusian. And his break with the experimental musicians of his time is he felt that experimental music was pessimistic and fed into the Malthusianism of the British ruling class. So he made a point of having his experimental music be optimistic. And, you know, the lyrics can be a little bit hokey, but they're also, you know, there's just this glow, this joy that flows through every Cornelius Cardew song. Right? It's happy and it's optimistic and it's made to inspire you to get involved in the political process. I have often said there's a lot of art that I agree with politically that I don't agree with spiritually. Great example, Ken Loach. I might agree with the message of a lot of Ken Loach, the British socialists' films, but I don't agree with it spiritually. You feel like shit after you watch a Ken Loach movie. The Wind That Shakes the Barley. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It's a very tragic story about Ireland and the struggle of the British people. But after you watch The Wind That Shakes the Barley, you feel like shit. And I felt like shit after watching that movie. It just doesn't make you feel good, even though politically it's correct. I agree with the film 100%. It still makes me feel like shit, you know, when I watch it. And Cardew, he had the understanding that he was an organizer. He was building a movement. And that, you know, if people leave your concert feeling like shit, even if they get the correct political message, it's not worth it. So this is Cardew's song, British Working Class. And I'm going to put this on. It is a very, very optimistic song that he wrote for the British working class and his confidence that they would make a revolution. So I'm going to put this on. It's Cornelius Cardew singing the lyrics. And while I'm waiting for you all to send questions, we're going to listen to some Cardew music tonight. That's what we're going to do. So yeah, if you all can send questions, we'll put on some Cornelius Cardew music. We'll put some other music on as well. But yeah, I am really learning to appreciate Cornelius Cardew and learning to understand why I've always found his music so inspirational. There's an optimism that flows through every Cardew song, and that's why I like it. So yeah, we'll do British Working Class. If I can just find just get it to come up in the desktop. You know how these things go. But yeah, I don't think I've played this song on here before. I may have, right? I've played Cardew music on here many times. Cornelius Cardew, the experimental composer who became a communist. I have played his songs on many live streams, so there's a chance I've probably played this song on here before, but it's been a while. So we'll see. But yeah, if I could just get it to show up on the desktop. I don't know why. It's taking a while to show up on the desktop, but it will, and we'll put it on. But yeah, if you've got any questions, please send them. Please send questions for the second half of the show. I look forward to answering any questions that you all have. That's really, you can do it via buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. You can do it however you want. Rumble rants, super chats. We accept super chats. But yeah, I do want to have some questions to answer here in the second half of the show. So if we can just, we'll put some music on. Yeah. Don't know why it's. Yeah, I'm just trying to get the song to come up on here. I might put another song on while I wait for this one to come on. I don't know why it's taking so long to come on here. Okay, well, let's do this is his musical instrumental performance of a Chinese communist song called Golden Mountain in Beijing. I've always really liked this melody. It's a Tibetan melody that the Chinese communists adopted. And then I first learned of it through Cardew. I've listened to other versions of it. I will say Cardew's version I really like because it has kind of a peaceful tone to it. So yeah, we'll do Golden Mountain in Beijing. Then we'll do British Working Class. So this is Cardew's performance of Golden Mountain in Beijing. It's only instrumental. He's not singing in this one. It's just instrumental of the Chinese communist anthem, Golden Mountain in Beijing, the Red song. Here we go. Yes, I absolutely love that. That's Cornelius Cardew's version of Golden Mountain in Beijing. But now we will hear Cornelius Cardew's optimistic, hopeful song, British Working Class. Here we go.
British ruling class puffed up with arrogance, boasted that the sun shone on your vast empire. That sun is now eclipsed. British ruling class, we have got news for you. Your time has run out, you have got to go. Light is shining in the sky, heralding the dawn of a glorious new day. British ruling class, your revolutionary force to build a socialist land. British working class, you have a fine history. Fierce battles waged against a vicious enemy with grim determination. British working class aspires to revolution in the face of attempts to crush this aspiration of socialism in Britain. Light is shining in the sky, heralding the dawn of a glorious new day. British working class, your revolutionary force to build our socialist land. In the 1840s, Marx and Engels on our shores organized and hammered out the objective laws propelling history. Marxist-Leninist science is the guiding star, charting the course for the working class. Socialist revolution. Light is shining in the sky, heralding the dawn of a glorious new day. British working class, your revolutionary force to build our socialist land. Persisting in the face of every difficulty, in 1979 was formed our new party, a glorious victory. Rallying to this flag is the only way, workers, to usher in the bright new day of socialism in Britain. Light is shining in the sky, heralding the dawn of a glorious new day. British working class, your revolutionary force to build our socialist land.
I love the optimism in that song. You know, light is shining in the sky, heralding the dawn of a glorious new day. Yeah, I mean, it's an optimistic song. It's an optimistic song. I'll just keep going with this until anyone sends any questions for me to answer. I really do need people to send questions. But until anybody sends any questions, I guess we'll just keep playing music. But yeah, if you got any questions for me to answer, anything for me to respond to, buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin or super chat. Super chats work. Rumble rants. But yeah, send me some questions. If not, we'll just keep playing music. So here's another Cardew song. The Lords of Labor. The Lords of Labor. This is a favorite. The lyrics are a bit stereotypically Cardew, very forced. The chorus is oppose all attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis. Very poetic. But, it's Cardew, right? You just got to love him. So here we go. Lords of Labor.
The bankrupt schemes to keep us down. Their message to the working class is to cringe before the rich man's frown. They say that it's in the whole country's interest to tighten our belts and make no demands, but they speak for the class that exploits us and rules us, and we must get them off our hands. Our labor power is all we sell it at the rich man's price. This system is called wage slavery, but democracy sounds a bit more polite. They say that if our wage increases, the prices will rise to compensate. But the only ones who receive compensation are capitalist vampires who suck out our life. Proposal attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis. Proposal attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis.
The capitalists fight with one another to corner the market and divide up the world. The quest for maximum profit is the cause of war and puts us on the door. Their greed leads them into a crisis they try to resolve with a more fascist state. Our struggles against the whole capitalist system, so strike at the fascists as well as the cuts.
Proposal attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis. Proposal attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis.
Yeah. Dan says that song would never crack Billboard 100 as long as profits are number one priority. Yeah, well, that's the point. Cornelius Cardew became very famous as an experimental composer, and then he realized that experimental music was pessimistic and was only leading people in a negative place. And so, he at that point decided that he wanted to make only socialist music, and only music that spread a revolutionary message. And it's very admirable in a lot of ways. And I think I might want to just show, there's like a little short film about him. I've shown it on here before, like the clip about his politics. And I might be able to show that again. I could swear I had that on my desktop, but yeah, let me show that. I do have a couple other songs of his I'd like to play, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, let's see if I can. Let me see if I can find it on my desktop here. I particularly like him, as you know. I mean, he's somebody that I play on these streams quite a bit. So. Yeah, let me see if I can find the little short film about who he was. Yeah, I might want to show that. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, I can answer questions. If not, we'll be on here a little while. But there we go. So yeah, let me see if I thought I might have put it here. I might have to download it again. I may actually have to download it again, come to think of it, but that's okay. We can play more music unless people ask more questions between now and then. And then, yeah, I think I may have to download the song again. All right. Well, yeah, I guess we'll play one of his that I've always enjoyed. This is called "We Sing for the Future." It's always been a favorite of mine. So we'll play that. "We Sing for the Future," a very optimistic song. So here we go. Also got crazy lyrics, and I'll see about putting on the documentary about his life. We can show that unless any questions come in. So here we go.
In utter chaos, the old order spews out unlimited decadence and parasitism. It's a disaster to mankind and fights against progress with unprecedented ferocity. Stricken by all kinds of sickness, the system's in all-sided crisis with economic at the base. Spiritual social and cultural devastation. The crisis is social and political too. In the midst of this dying old world, the proletariat of all lands are fighting. The oppressed in their millions are rising, demanding their social and national liberation. Genuine Marxist, Leninists on a world scale are organizing to end the old world. We sing for the future, proletarians of all lands. We unite and fight together for revolution and socialism. We sing for the future, proletarians of all lands. We unite and fight together for the victory of communism.
Paris Commune was the signal of coming revolutionary storms and victory of Marxism. October Revolution brought Leninism to the workers, established the first proletarian state. New civilization has come into being. The guns of Aurora so boldly proclaimed. Socialism is the inevitable next stage. It will prevail all over the globe. No refrain about the old world, no illusion about the past, for it will look to the future of toilers under the banner of Marxism-Leninism. This is the future for all mankind, a future devoid of all class oppression. There will be no place in this new world for imperialism, social imperialism, or all reaction. We sing for the future, proletarians of all lands. We unite and fight together for revolution and socialism. We sing for the future, proletarians of all lands. We unite and fight together for the victory of communism.
Come join with us, all the youth of our land. Come join all the toilers who refuse to be slaves. Come all who fight for the forward march, for the brilliant future of communism. We bring with us from the past what is purest, the sentiment for the liberation of man. And from today we take Marxism, Leninism, revolutionary struggles of the workers of all lands. Our revolution is based on the proletariat, the only thoroughly revolutionary class. Proletariat is a grave digger of the bourgeoisie and all exploiting systems. Our songs are songs of proletarian struggle, of revolution and sacrifice. Come one and all and sing for the future. The victory of revolution is on the horizon. We sing for the future, proletarians of all lands. We unite and fight together for revolution and socialism. We sing for the future, proletarians of all lands. We unite and fight together for the victory of communism.
I love that song. That is a great song. But yeah, I do have, there's a documentary about his life, and we'll put that on. Again, if anyone has any Rumble rants, any questions to send in, now would be the time to send them. Because if not, I'm just going to keep playing Cordelius Cardew songs all night. But yeah, send to buy me a coffee. You can cash at me, Caleb Maupin 22. You can Rumble rant. You can also do a super chat. Anything else you want me to talk about? We're past 2 hours, so I might just wrap this up pretty soon. But yeah, we'll put on the, oh, you sent me a Rumble rant. Very good. Okay. Have you heard about Bill C9 Canada? Well, tell you what, I will look it up and reply while we watch, while the documentary about Cornelius Cardew's life plays, and I'll answer that Rumble rant and any other questions that come in. So buy me a coffee, whatever. I'll start answering questions. I actually don't know about this law that someone asked about, but I will investigate while this documentary about Cornelius Cardew's life is on. And then I'll answer that and any other questions that come on. And then I'm done because, so there we go. So let's watch this little documentary about
ban the scratch orchestra from playing and get the police to sort of bar the way to the hall so we couldn't play. There was questioning, why this was so. But it's like it became more conscious, more connected with an analysis of what was going on in the world. And everyone was politicized to greater and lesser extent. But Cornelius Cardew moved on, the scratch orchestra generally moved on. And this was kind of an affirmation of its identity in new circumstances.
Especially when there was extra deployment of army men. The attack could not have been done.
The way I see it, and what I think Cornelius represented was this spirit that everything affects a musician, especially like the state of the world it is today.
There is only one life, there is only one truth. There is the lie of revisionism and opportunism of all youth, the lie of imperialism and reaction. And there is the truth of Marxism-Leninism, of revolution and socialism. There is only one life, there is only one truth.
Arrived in Toronto in all of its autumnal splendor in the beginning of October, and we were unsure about what would happen, how things would go. We didn't know the Canadians, we didn't know the musicians or the poets or anything. And the plan was, though, to work together on some joint work. The entire concert was made up of new things, produced from the beginning of October to the 7th, which was the first concert. And Hardy Baines, who was mentioned earlier, was always inspiring and enlightening in this process. So what was produced was a songbook, which I have a copy of. And there were, in fact, 78 poems published in this. Cornelius, transcribed all of the songs that appeared in it. And in fact, 35 of the poems were set to music.
Prophets, there amongst these fighters, you will find my boat.
À la Colombie britannique, le Yukon, l'État des droits du Nord-Ouest.
On our shores, organized and hammered out the objective laws, propelling history.
Dogfight among the rich, exploit all the workers, make money from pitch. You can go back to the land. You can turn on or tune in or drop out, live on 7th Avenue.
Social and national liberation. Our sons and sons of proletarian struggle, of revolution and sacrifice. Can you
I remember the tour as being a complete whirlwind of ideas, new ideas. But also a whirlwind in the sense that we travelled, thousands of miles all over Canada. So we would be rehearsing, like an overnight car trips over the ferries and things, rehearsing the new songs. And then when we did get some sleep, when we got up for breakfast, with being new poems are set. In fact, I remember one of someone's poems that I was setting, Hardy or Baines actually suggested, that made you suggested almost like a musical, why not use a musical style?
And as far as telling stories about Cornelius and his life is concerned and so on, the most important thing which I found about him was this social side, that he was one in all situations with everybody. When the concert was given in Toronto, there were night before there was nothing, and how a performance is put that evening. We did have performance. It was for 3 hours, and people did applaud. All these are concrete facts. So if you don't have that social side, and it's not just Cornelius, I found the comments from Britain all very precious in this respect.
British working class, you have a fine history. This battle's waged against a vicious enemy with great determination. British working class aspires to revolution in the face of attempts to crush this aspiration of socialism in Britain. Light is shining in the sky, heralding the dawn of a glorious new day. British working class, your revolutionary force to build our socialist life.
We have no false euphoria or expectations of any victories in relation to the grave problems which confront the people, or the difficulties to be overcome, and the sacrifice which has to be made. But neither are we pessimistic or fatalistic before the attempts of the ruling class to inculcate an atmosphere of fear and powerlessness in the face of the onrush of racism, fascism and war. The very fact that the British and other reactionary powers have racism as a preferred policy, are developing fascism and preparing for war, shows not their strength but their weakness in the face of their deepening crisis and the rising struggles of the people.
So yes, once you listen to the sort of opening address of the June the 7th conference, which catalogues what was going on in the country at the time.
Yeah.
So the level of racist attacks, the attacks from the organised fascists, the Deptford firebomb, the actions of the government, both in terms of attacking immigrants, attacking national minorities in general, and the Nationality Act or Nationality Bill as it was then. So you have a whole kind of catalogue of the attacks that were going on, and you can kind of see the level that things are at. But also you see the sort of level of the parties organising and the politics that it was putting forward to deal with the threats as they existed. So both can bring back the intensity and political level and political consciousness that existed then. So I think that makes it particularly powerful.
What came to my mind when I was listening to it was like just a vision of the intensity of what we were doing, out on the streets, as you were saying, out on the streets, dealing with the racist attacks, campaigning against the government and explaining to people. And I just remember the intensity of those days, and also the sense that the main thing we were immersed in was what we were doing to change the situation. It wasn't like a sense of oppression at these things happening, because we were, so immersed in actually day-to-day battling it
was
and
life,
working it
wasn't
out.
it? It was really almost every moment of every day was the engagement with the struggle, and the need to be conscious of that and consciously active. and to feel that sense of unity with, I think, with other members of the party at the time, and members of the community was gave a great deal of energy, in fact. I used to find these little fragments, like on the back of a bus ticket, few little notes, and certainly when he was in prison, he's, hard to get hold of paper. So he said he'd play the organ so that would allow him to play, yes, but also to get paper.
Okay.
And prayer sheets. And he composed on the back of those whilst he was inside. I remember when he came out, I went to meet him, so I was going to work, but he came out early, and he'd asked me to bring some papers with me. And he was released at the same time as 2 Iranians. And he wanted the paper for the Iranians. Yeah. So he was already working. He hadn't put one foot outside, and he was already, his mind was there. It was a task to be done. And, we had a brief breakfast, and he was off. Just boundless belief in what he was doing and what the party was doing, rather than him himself. And incredible attention to detail as well. And a huge kind of drive to try and enthuse people. That was the other thing, to try and lead them. He really felt the need to lead, I think. Not again really about him, but about just such a strong belief in the party and that, we were going to change things. That it was possible.
At last in each country produces diamonds so bright, its best sons and daughters who are prepared to give their life to building the party of the working class, to lead the broad masses in the revolutionary fight. The Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain, Marxist Leninist, is the head to direct the blows of the working class's clenched fist.
He used to agonise about things often. He'd rewrite, he'd write and rewrite. And I don't think he was always so relaxed.
What sort of things did he used to agonise over then?
I can certainly think about it in musical terms, because I knew, when, for instance, a certain passage of something he wasn't happy with, he'd hammer at it, he'd be over and over and over it, and then leave it, and then be back again, come in from something and just spend 10 minutes at it again. So, but also I think, talk, speeches, how to say something in the way that he really wanted to say it. And probably also through interaction with, writing, and then it's looked at, and then you rethink it, rephrase it, because it's not a solo piece. This is the work of the party. And, that was sometimes, I think, a matter of struggle as well. It wasn't just everybody, had one idea and pursued that one idea. I think it was something that evolved. And so, that was the way that I think things matured.
But you were involved in PCA and People's Liberation Music?
Yes, more PCA, a little bit People's Liberation Music,
right.
Particularly when we were on big demonstrations. Emily and I and Georgina used to sing at the truck, and Pete sometimes, Cole sometimes, and it was a sort of moving group of people. Sometimes, it always felt really great actually, to be singing revolutionary songs and to be sort of there and, hopefully inspiring people, and sometimes quite hair-raising when things got a little rough.
Nazis have no right to organise! 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 Wipe out the Nazi movement! Wipe out the Nazi movement! Wipe out the Nazi movement!
assemble in the sun, and you'll be there beside me on the march. Then you'll see the banners and the singing bursting for the dawn, whose coming we proclaim. Red as blood, its rays set us aflame. Stand up and fight, our hearts are all aflame. The new life is coming to put the past to shame. The happiness is part of the sun. And we cannot be wrong. Freedom is the content of our song.
What a cultural worker is going to choose, which theme and from where. It is very, very important. For example, to reduce culture merely as an instrument of propaganda, a song or something, it is to vulgarize that culture. PCA and Canadian Culture Workers Committee made some choices. And so it took up various forms and put very different content in them.
When the rhythm and change and the speed of history vie with the events that unfold.
The stage was now set in 1981-82 to produce broad, revolutionary mass culture forms professionally. It is at this precise point that we lost Cornelius Cardew.
Yeah, he was quite a dynamic individual. And he's a little obscure, but you know, this book I've been enjoying. It was written by one of his best friends, John Tilbury, who was apparently a famous pianist in Britain, and I'm enjoying it. So yeah, I really like Cornelius Cardew and I really love his music, and I'm learning a lot about him from this very, very thick, intense biography of him by John Tilbury. So we should take inspiration. I am here to recruit you to live a life of struggle. I want you to be an anti-imperialist, and I want you to come to our national 7-day training program and get involved in the movement. I want you to, learn what it's like to have a fulfilling life, fighting for a cause that you believe in and fighting for the future. And I look at Cornelius Cardew, and despite the fact that ideologically he's very much in a different place than we are, he was somebody who did that. And he went from just kind of being this experimental composer to living a life of struggle. And I find him to be a very inspiring person, and the optimism that flows through all of his music, I find very, very inspiring. So I want to get you involved. I would like to recruit you to the Center for Political Innovation. I would like to get you involved in our movement. If you want to know what we're all about, we got a big book now, right? Imperialism and Anti-Imperialism. It's all in here. And I'm working on a very, very short book of quotations. So, I'm getting that done, and hopefully I'll be traveling in July, and definitely in August, we are having our national 7-day training program. So if you'd like to sign up for that, here is the link to register to get involved, because we got to do what Cornelius Cardew did. He was traveling all over Canada, spreading a revolutionary message. We got to travel all over America, spreading a revolutionary message that Iran is not our enemy, that our enemy is on Wall Street and in London. So register today for our national 7-day training program. We got to build a movement. That's the only thing that's going to get us out of this. So yeah. All right. So we've had multiple questions come in. Now, the first question kind of perplexed me. It was a Rumble rant, and it was, it says, did you hear about the C9 bill in Canada? So I didn't hear about it, but I looked it up. The C9 bill is a law that basically, it's called the Combating Hate Act, and it looks like it's already been passed. And it's very repressive in that not only does it, enhance penalties for crimes if you deem it to be a hate crime. So you're being punished not for the crime you commit, but for the thoughts in your head while you commit the crime, which is a little bit, bizarre. If they can claim that you're motivated by hate to commit your crime, they give you a more intense sentence, and that's already been used against Muslims and Arabs. And if you're motivated by opposing Israel, and you get into a fist fight with a Zionist at a protest, well, then it's even more prison time because you must be anti-Semitic, But also they ban various symbols, calling them hate symbols. It's a very oppressive law, and it's already pretty much been implemented. And it's a huge attack on free speech. And we see that Palestine Action, a group of activists in Britain, have been arrested and sentenced to 25 years in jail for their, anti-Israel activism in Britain. They're calling a terrorist act because it was done to support the Palestinians. Yeah, it sounds horrible. It sounds absolutely horrible. And that this is the whole thing, is that we're supposed to be a free and open society. But, the logic is, well, in order to stay a free and open society, we have to repress certain views. Yeah, I mean, it becomes a dog chasing its tail, right? We're told Russia is bad because it's supposedly not free. It seems pretty free. I've been there many times. It seems like a pretty free country to me, but supposedly Russia's not free. And so if RT is on TV, people might watch it, and that might inspire them to support a country that is supposedly not free. So we got to outlaw it. We got to take away our freedom to watch it because, it becomes absolute silliness. Liberalism has never been sincere. At the same time, the founding fathers were writing about freedom of speech and the rights of all men. All men are created equal. They own slaves. Liberalism is always like that. It has never been totally sincere, but yet now it is becoming more authoritarian. And this is a process of Bonapartism, where sections of the ruling class battle against each other and liberal societies collapse into authoritarianism amid a crisis. And if you want to, watch, I have a great slideshow about it here on this channel. I also have the book, What is Bonapartism? This is the natural result of a long-term economic crisis. And that's what we're dealing with, right? This is when you enter a long-term crisis of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit. The liberal society begins to lock down, and the ruling class begin fighting among themselves because of the economic crisis, because they need the crisis to be resolved to stabilize the system. And this is also a moment when revolutionary organizations can see an opening and build a movement. So we have our work cut out for us. That said, in addition to that, so now Gabby sent a super chat, and she said, why does the media always dismiss everything as conspiracy theory? Well, everything is a conspiracy theory, but it's actually fact, so it's unfair. Well, here's the thing. Even the word conspiracy theory, what is that? That doesn't mean it's false. It just means you have a theory, something that seems true, but you can't 100% prove it, but you can make strong arguments for it. A theory about people getting together and making a plan. A conspiracy. A conspiracy is people getting together and making a plan, and a theory is, a theory, right? For example, right? Every story of 9/11 is a conspiracy theory, right? The official story of 9/11 is a conspiracy theory. The idea is that Osama bin Laden conspired. It's a theory that a guy named Osama bin Laden conspired to bring down the Twin Towers. Now, that's, the theory about a conspiracy that our government accepts to be true, but it is a conspiracy theory. There's nothing inherently false about a conspiracy theory, right? But that term has been made into something we've all been told to roll our eyes about, and that's actually a result of CIA activity. And you can read about, there was a memorandum where they talked about using the term conspiracy theory, making that a term that is used to discredit ideas, and that's very fascinating. Dr. what is his name? Miller, who's a professor at NYU. What is his name? Miller. What is his name? The professor at NYU. What is his name? Mark Crispin Miller is his name, and he's written a lot about this. And I've interviewed him before. I've been to his classes, hung out. He used to come into RT and do interviews. Dr. Mark Crispin Miller has talked a lot about how the word conspiracy theory, just the term itself, is propaganda, because conspiracies happen all the time. Theorizing that a conspiracy might happen does not make you crazy, and does not make what you thought of necessarily improbable. But yet we have this association in our heads with conspiracy theory. It's a term that draws up mental illness. It's a term that draws up delusional paranoia. But prosecutors prosecute people for conspiracy all the time. And in order to prosecute them, they have to develop a theory about the conspiracy these people engaged in. And then they have to convince the jury they actually did it to convict them, right? We have conspiracy laws in this country. The term conspiracy theory, it's a word that literally should not conjure up the image that it conjures. But thanks to the CIA, and they've turned that word into a word that, into a phrase that we immediately associate with anything crazy. Conspiracies happen. People conspire to work in their own interest. I will say that there is a certain mode of thought that is, that there's people that have what I would call like the conspiratorial worldview. And that worldview tends to be quite pessimistic. It tends to be quite pessimistic. And, it sees it assigns causality, and it links, I think conspiracies do go on, but there's not one grand giant plot. There's no they. Right? There's not one group that controls the world. It's not that simple. There are different disagreements. There are alliances. There are factions. And yes, if one group controlled absolutely everything, and absolutely everything in the world was part of their grand plan, we'd all be screwed. But at the same time, things would move a lot more smoothly. There would be a lot less chaos and instability and confusion in the world. There's not one giant plan. There's not one they. There are different factions that have different interests. There are, and that's how you have to understand it. And conspiracies do happen. And, like the biolabs, they called that a conspiracy theory. Well, how is it a conspiracy theory? Where's the conspiracy? It was a fact, right? That the U.S. government was funding various laboratories that were doing investigations into gain-of-function research and deadly germs. Where's the conspiracy theory? There's no conspiracy there. It's right out in the open. Everyone knew these labs existed. We have the documents now, but they called it a conspiracy theory. Well, there's no theory about a conspiracy. This is fact. This is just something that happened. But yet they called it a conspiracy theory because they didn't want you to think about it, right? And they just attached that label to it. And that, and so, yeah, it's just a word that has been weaponized. It's a term that we have learned to psychologically associate in a certain way. And that's a problem. And so that's why the media uses that term, is because it's been associated in a certain way. And it's a way of preventing people from investigating things. It's a way of dismissing things. That's why that term gets used so much. So I hope that is helpful. It's a buzz phrase. There you go. A buzz phrase. That's a good way of putting it. And then Stephen Asif sent me a buy me a coffee, and he said, I heard an older conservative on YouTube deny that the Iran war took place. What are your thoughts? PSYOP at work. Also, some deny the decline of U.S. empire and think manufacturing will magically return. As the crisis develops, would such people join our movement? Okay. Well, first of all, the Iran war absolutely took place. It took place. There's quite a bit, of evidence that it took place. A lot of people are dead who were not alive. There's all kinds of video of the missiles, and, the Strait of Hormuz was closed, and Supreme Leader Khamenei is dead. And, the war clearly happened. It clearly happened. There's that. I don't understand on what grounds he denied that it took place. That's a bit much, right? That's a little bit nuts. But as far as thinking that the manufacturing will return, well, the main thing to remember about manufacturing, the main reason that manufacturing jobs are scarce these days isn't offshoring. That's part of it. yes, offshoring happens, right? The auto industry sent jobs to Mexico where they could pay workers cheaper and such. But the main reason that there are fewer jobs in manufacturing nowadays is because of technology. Technology has eliminated the role of the worker at the assembly line. That's the issue. And that technology is automating the jobs of human beings. So it won't magically come back. Even if you passed a law that you had to make every product in America, it still takes way fewer workers to make those products. Now, there was a very good article that Bloomberg News ran, and it was about when Trump was running for office the first time. He said that he was going to make Apple make their iPhones in America. And of course, that didn't happen. And Bloomberg News actually explained, in America, we do not have enough engineers. We do not have enough skilled people to make our iPhones in America. We don't, right? I mean, if you look at it, the reason that iPhone makes their iPhones in China is because China has the engineers who can do it. China has the space to build the factories. And in fact, China's got all the necessary ability for Apple to set up shop and make their iPhones there. We don't have that in America. And that for us to start churning out the number of engineers that are needed, and for us to be able to assemble the people to be available to, it would require a mobilization of the country on the level of the Second World War. If Apple wanted to start making its iPhones in America, the whole country would have to be mobilized, and we'd have to completely rebuild entire cities and all of that. It just wouldn't be possible. We don't have the human capabilities. We don't have the facilities to build them. It's not a matter of just making them do it. You would have to completely rebuild the roads and stuff. It's absolutely crazy. It was a great article from Bloomberg News. And it just shows that, China is a great place to do business. America, not so much, right? Our population is not well educated. And on top of that, we don't have the ability to get stuff done, right? And people talk about California, how the roads take years to get fixed and all that. We don't have the ability to just make stuff happen. The reason that Apple makes their iPhones in China is because the government is able to say, okay, we need this many workers here. We need this space to build a factory, and they do it. Right. But we don't have that in America. And we just don't have the ability, and that's frightening to think about. So he's wrong there, but I'm glad that he wants the jobs to come back, and I'm glad that he feels that it's not, and there's something in that guy you're describing, Stephen, in that he feels things could be better, and he's right. He feels that things are not better because certain people are benefiting from them not being better, and he feels things could be better. He doesn't quite understand that he doesn't understand why, but he feels that things don't have to be the way they are. They are because certain bad actors have the power. So in a way, he's pretty advanced in that understanding. And yes, a kind of person like that could join our movement as the crisis intensifies, right? He feels things are bad, feels they don't have to be this bad, but certain people are just keeping them this bad for their own benefit. That sounds like, somebody who, in a way, is somewhat advanced. He doesn't understand the economy and the nature of manufacturing, and he doesn't understand what is getting in our way, which is the irrational system of profits and command and the need for centralization and a government of action that fights for working families. But at the same time, he does understand that things could be better. And that's what I hear. When I hear his message, Stephen, what it sounds like he's saying is things don't have to be this bad. They tell us, oh, it's just this or that. But no, things are bad because certain people are making them bad. They don't have to be that way. And I think that's a very advanced understanding. And there's a whole, thing about that is that when people have an advanced sentiment or advanced understanding, you want to unite with it, right? You want to find things you can connect with it. Kind of like how David, developed a narrative that everyone could connect with. The story of David and Goliath, everyone can connect with. David was not a normal person, as I emphasized. He was somebody who was so obsessed and so skilled, he could become an amazing musician. He was someone who was so obsessed and so skilled, he invented a new weapon and pioneered weaponry, but yet he developed an origin story that everyone could relate to, right? And, so this person, it sounds like there's something in this person's narrative we can very much relate to, which is that he feels things are bad, but they don't have to be. And that, the rich and powerful are getting in the way and that things don't have to be this bad. Well, he's right about that. So let's unite with that. And let's find a way that we could have a mass line that could give voice to his sentiments. Think about it. A mass line. Our 4-point plan is a mass line, right? If we had a government that invested in people and all that, you don't have to understand all the complicated ideology. Shouldn't we? Our infrastructure is falling apart. What if we hired all the young people to go out and rebuild America? That's a mass line. That's something everyone would want. What if we had a bank that injected credit into this country to make the economy stronger? A national bank. People get it, right? What if we took over our oil and natural gas and used the natural resources of America to make America a wealthier country? People can get behind that. What if we enacted an economic bill of rights? People can get behind that. This is a mass line, a transitional program and a mass line. And then those of us that have the complex understanding and can give our lives to struggle, we can understand the nitty gritty and we can be obsessive, right? But we develop a mass line that gives voice to the sentiments that are among the broad population overall, right? That's our job, is with our obsessiveness and with our brilliance, and with our deeper understanding, we cultivate a mass line that everyone can relate to. That's what we're trying to do. And that's what I was trying to get at with my David and Goliath presentation. So I hope that was helpful, everybody. But yeah, thanks people for stepping up and sending some questions there at the end. And thanks for listening to all that Cardew music. I'm going to say goodnight for now, but I'll be back tomorrow night. We got Juche Study Group tomorrow night. I almost forgot the Juche Study Group, right? So join us tomorrow night. Noah will be leading another session of the Juche Study Group, the American Juche Study Group. Be sure to come for that. That's always great. And it's open too, right? As long as you've got a webcam, you can come in and join. So, join the American Juche Study Group, everybody, tomorrow night. That'll be on this channel and the CPI YouTube channel. And yeah, we're going to put on the closing music. It's been fun. I'll be back. Join us tomorrow night for Juche. And yeah, we're always doing great stuff here. So, new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.